Hey, good morning. I hope you are doing good today. It is a frigid and cold Monday morning here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Um, I was looking at the weather, and I think it's -5 outside, but with the wind chill is -20. So it is a little brittle out there. So I'm going to encourage everybody on this Monday morning to take your time and to, whether you're going to work or school or you got things you got to do, hustle and bustle of the day, to kind of take your time if you're in the Northeast. Now, down south, I'm sure y'all probably ain't dealing with none of this. And in the Caribbean, you're probably not dealing with any of this as well. But it's a little chilly up here. But today, you want to take an extra few minutes to do whatever you got to do to kind of get out there and go from there. But hey, this is Monday Mornings with Pastor Herb Ford. I'm so excited to be with you. Last week, I think I left you guys with a repost of one of my New Year's Eve celebration videos with Miss Sandina Neely, and it was phenomenal. I wanted to replay that because she did such a phenomenal job, with us to kind of prepare us for this new year. And so we're a couple weeks into the new year, and I thought I would talk this morning a little bit about some things that I think are very important. So no matter where you are, it's 2024 and going to be a phenomenal year for you. And so I want to give you a little tip that I've been doing for a very long time that I think can really help you, because I think many times people have a problem with this because they don't really understand its value. The Bible makes this statement that they overcame, speaking of believers, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimonies. Your testimony is an important part of you continuing to move forward in this thing that we call life. The testimonies of others that you read or you hear do the same thing. Why? Because they cause your faith to rise on the inside of you. And most people's problem is they quit believing. Most people's issue is they cannot see a better day. You think about people who are dealing with depression, people who've had a lost loved one, or people that have had something really bad that's happened to them, or they live in a place that's oppressive in nature. Many times their spirit is crushed or broken or downtrodden because of all those things that have occurred to them. And so what we try to do is to help you understand that faith can rise on the inside of your heart once you understand that God is with you, what God has done for you before, and how that is an indicator of what he's going to do in the future. It's a tremendous blessing, and I want to encourage you with that. Now, as we read this morning, I was thinking about this particular story in Genesis 22, and many of you may have heard it before. It's in the King James Version. Genesis 22 is a testimony of just monumental proportion. It is huge because it's telling us a little bit about our God and how he does things. Genesis 22 and verse number 1, it says, "And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham." So we understand the word tempt means to prove. Abraham and said unto him, God said unto him, behold, here I am. And he said, take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get into the land of Moriah and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee. So if you remember in this story, Abraham had been waiting on a child, and he was 99 years old or something, but before this child was even born. And he had been waiting on a child. And so he finally gets this child. He's probably in his teen years or early 20s, something like that. And Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his ass and took two of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering. So he grabbed that and he rose up and went to a place which God had told him. Then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw a place. And Abraham said unto the young men, abide here with the ass, and it's talking about a donkey. And I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come back to you. So they're going to go and worship. They're going to come back to God, or come back to the group of men. And Abraham took the wood and the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac, his son. And he took the fire and in his hand and the knife, and they both went up them together. And Isaac said unto Abraham, his father, he said, Father, he said, here am I, my son. And he said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? So we can see here, even prior to there being any law, or prior to there being any type of requirement by God for anything, Abraham understood sacrifices. He understood the atonement, portion of a person giving up an offering because of the goodness of God. So his son had already understood those things. And Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for the burnt offering. So they went up together, and they came to the place which God had told him. And Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order, bound Isaac, his son, and laid him on the altar. I wonder what that conversation was like. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel called out unto him and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. And he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do anything unto him. For now I see that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the lamb and offered him up for the burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the place Jehovah Jireh, or Jehovah Uri. And it is said in that day, in the mount of the Lord shall be established. And the angels called unto Abraham a second time out of heaven. And he said, by myself have I sworn, said the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not beheld thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thee, thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the sea, which thy seed shall possess the gates of thy enemy. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Man, this is huge. I mean, this is so blockbuster in so many different ways, because we see not only an act of faith here, but we also see how God deals with man. It's one of those things where, if you think about in your own life, sacrificing a kid, or any of those kind of things. I mean, it don't matter where you are, what generation of life you're in. It doesn't matter any of that kind of stuff. If you don't understand or recognize how God does a thing and how God operates, basically what he was saying was, take something that's very valuable, the most valuable thing that he had, and I want you to sacrifice that, because he knew how important Isaac was to Abraham. He knew that Abraham had waited a lifetime for a son. He knew all of that. And he said, I want you to take this kid and I want you to sacrifice him and give that up. And it's so much like he himself gave up his son. If you remember, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And so once God saw that there was a man that was able to do that, then he was. So how does this pertain to us on this Monday morning? Here it is. One of the things that you have to understand is the importance of your testimony. Abraham, in this setting, made a memorial there and began to call that particular place Jehovah Jireh. Why? Because he always wanted to remember that it was in this space that God took me from where I was and moved me to where I am today. And I can think back over my life so many different times. I remember there was a time where I was believing God for a college scholarship. And I remember writing a letter to God as my about that. I remember when I was believing God for a wife. I remember when I was believing God for a home, for a car, for a job. My goodness, for healing. We're believing God for a daughter. And all of these things, what I've tried to do is keep them in what I call my faith book. Okay, my faith book, not Facebook, but my faith book. And it's basically a recording of the testimonies that God did for me in my life. I use these to share on platforms like this. Use these to share with my children, with other believers, to help them remember this. And it's very, if you get this, you'll get the whole thing. If God can take you from space A and get you to space B, I should record that. I should put that down somewhere, even details. And then if he can get me from A to B, he can get me from B to C. And if he can get me from B to C, he can get me from C to D, all the way through my life. But I have to be able to look back on something. And the way he looked back on it is he called the place Jehovah Jireh, which means the Lord will provide. The Lord is a provider. He shall provide for us. And I want to make sure that you understand that God is a provider for you and your family and your friends. God is a provider. He has set heaven and all that heaven has as a not just reward, but he has set it up there to assist you, even as Holy Spirit, in obtaining those things which you need to obtain in your life. So whether you are going off to a business this morning, this week, whether you are negotiating a big deal, it doesn't matter what it is. I want you to remember that the testimonies that are coming in your life today, that you set something aside so that you can remember that God did this. I was right here when God did this. I was over there when God did this. And you jot that down and you keep that thing. Why? Because it'll continue to cause your faith to rise and you continue to see the very best that God has for you. Man, I don't know about you, but I am excited, super excited for you today, because that is a key that has helped me in so many different ways in my life when I could look back and remember what has happened. I also think think about when Esther, if you think about the story of Esther, it was a particular time where Esther, where the children of Israel were going to be annihilated. Jerusalem, I mean, the folks there, they were going to be annihilated. And Esther, they began to pray and fast and whatnot on behalf of the children of Israel to really get in the face of God on some things. And the Bible says that that night, the king couldn't sleep. The king couldn't sleep. And so the king said, will you bring me the chronicles? Bring me the information on what's been going on in this deal. Why? Because they was recording what had happened. And it was because he went back and looked at what was recorded, he began to bestow some blessings on Mordecai and this kind of thing. Why? Because he saw the testimony of what had occurred when somebody tried to kill him, that Mordecai had jumped in and did something. Well, I'm telling you this same thing, that in your life, there are testimonies on what God did. And when you see that God took care of that negative situation, when you thought all was lost, when you thought there was nothing that was going to come about from it, God took care of it. And he's a on-time kind of God. Why? Because he is Jehovah Jireh. He is our provider. So if he's going to provide for you, make sure you jot down so you can help remember the things that he has done. Because if you can see where he's brought you from, you can definitely declare and see where he's taking you. I hope you agree with that here this morning. Share this with a friend, like this, post it, repost it, because God is your source. God bless you so much for coming on today. I hope to see you another time in the future on a Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. God bless you. You have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.